So there are two ways you could approach these. You could even do both ways, not a bad idea. Translating from symbols into words and then trying to find one that matches it, or translating words into symbols. So I think it tends to be a little easier to go from symbols to words. The disadvantage is it's a little less organized since the ones you need to solve are already in the word format. So we can try either way. Let's go from words to symbols. It's a little more difficult that way, but that way we can be more efficient also. So every student has played every hole. Um, so when you have double every positive, this one is just for any student you choose, and for any hole you choose, that student has played that hole. Everything's positive, everything's full. So this should be a for all, or for any. Those are the same thing. And so we get our K here. Um, Second one, no student has played any hole. So what I try to do is I try to toy around with the English a little bit until it's in a format of there exists and a for every, and then the predicate. I try to basically get it into this order because English doesn't necessarily always follow that natural order. So no student has played any hole. Um, Another way to say this is for any hole that you choose and for any student that you choose, the student has not played the hole. For any hole you choose, for any student you choose, the student has not played the hole. And notice when you have two for any's or two there exists, you can switch them the order. That's okay. It's when there's one for any and one exists that you cannot switch them. So in this case, no student has played any hole. It should be for any, and then a not. So we look down, and it turns out to be right at the end there. For any hole you choose, and for any student you choose, it's not the case that the student has played a hole. Another way, no student has played any hole. That's our every student has played at least one hole. So here's where rearranging the words it's going to help us a lot. It's going to make it a lot easier. Every student has played at least one hole. So for every student you find, there exists at least one hole that the student has played the hole. For any student you choose, there exists at least one hole that the student has played the hole. Um, so we want to look for every student. So that should be a for every. Here's a for every student. There exists a hole such that the student has played the hole. Every student has played at least one. Let's see. At least one student has played every hole. So in this case, we're actually going to flip the English because we don't have uh, there exist well, I guess we could do it. Let's see. At least one student has played every. There exists a student such that for every hole, the student has played the hole. Actually, that flows pretty nicely. At least one is the same as there exists. There exists a student such that for every hole, the student has played the hole. So this one would fall into A there. There exists a student such that for every hole or for any hole, the student has played the hole. None of the students have played every hole. I think this one really ratchets it up a notch in difficulty level. None of the students. So we don't have a symbol for none, right? I mean, you could negate a at least one, but we haven't really looked at a way to do that. We've only negated the end. So let's try to rephrase this in a way that follows the symbol patterns down here. None of the students have played every hole. Another way to say that is for every student you choose, for any student you choose, there exists at least one hole such that the student has not played the hole. For every student you choose, there exists a hole such that the student has not played the hole. So for any student you choose, there exists a hole such that the student has not played the hole. So that's going to be D. And notice what we did there. Instead of saying none of the students, we say none of the students have played every hole, which means another way to say that is any student you choose, we're going to be able to find at least one hole they haven't played. Chuck, there's going to be some hole he hasn't played. Anna, there's going to be some hole she hasn't played. Right? So for every student, there's going to be at least one hole they haven't played. All right, what about here? There's a hole that's been played by every student. So this one follows a little more naturally. There is a hole. There exists a Y. There exists a hole that has been played by every student. Such that for every student, for any X, PXY, the student has played the hole. There exists a Y such that for any X, PXY. That's what we see here in No hole has been played by every student. Again, I think these are a little trickier because we don't immediately have a symbol for no hole. So we rearrange, we say that in English in a couple different ways. No hole has been played by every student. No hole has been played by every student. So any hole you choose, there's at least one student who hasn't played the hole. That's another way of saying that. Any hole you choose, there's at least one student who hasn't played that. So for any Y, there exists X, at least one X, such that not PXY. So that's what we have here. For any hole, there exists at least one student such that the student hasn't played the hole. I think that's another hard one. I think 5 and 7 are both a lot trickier because you have to change that none of the no hole to a different way in English. And in number 8, there's at least one student who has not played any hole. So this one we can put into symbols fairly directly. There's at least one student, so there exists an X. There exists an X who has not played any hole. So there exists an X such that for any hole you choose, the student has not played the hole. So there's some student, maybe in our class, some student in our class that has never even played the disc golf course. It doesn't matter what hole you choose, they haven't played that hole. So there exists a student such that no matter what hole you choose, the student has not played the hole. And that one. So I think what you'll find is you'll find that, and as I'm going through these, I'm going to retract my former statement. I do think it might be a little easier to start with the English and then go here, because even if you get an English statement out of it, you don't know if that particular English statement is up here, and it might be worded differently. So I do think it's easier the way that we did it here in this video. And you'll notice that as you start doing them, like for every student and for every hole, the student has played the hole. Some of these start to make sense pretty quickly. The ones like number 5 and 7 will really take some practice, but you'll get it. You'll get there. All right. Write me with any questions.